morning, good evening, wherever you may be around the city and across the state, coming to you from the heart of Chicago. It's e-learning with Mr. Moeller. On today's show, we're going to take a look at political science and some of the concepts that go along with that. So we're talking about politics, political science. We're really only talking about one thing. We're talking about power. And power is the ability to do something or to make somebody else do something that you want them to do. And so kind of power really starts with this idea of force, right? You can make somebody do something. And so when we take a look at power, there's also a secondary definition called authority. So authority is a type of power. It is a power that is seen as legitimate by the group that, power is being wielded over. A great example of this would be like a parent or guardian who says, because I said so, and you pretty much go along and agree that, yeah, because you say so, it's true. The Queen of England is a great example. In America, we vote for our elected officials, and so we tend to believe that someone like the mayor, has authority because they were elected into that position. So politics and government is the way of making collective decisions as a society about how power will be used. And a lot of groups and a lot of nations will actually fail because they either don't have a system in place to make decisions as a group, or they have ways of making decisions that people do not think is legitimate. And that's where you get things like the French Revolution and other major upheavals. So we're talking about politics, we're talking about how do all of us collectively make decisions and who gets to make those decisions. So the question becomes for us, who gets to have that power, how should it be used, and how should we decide who gets to have that power and how it should be used? And so just a couple quick definitions before we get rolling here. Government is a system for making decisions. It's a lot more than that, but that's a good basic definition for us to start with. A rule or a law, you guys know this well, it's a way to exercise power over a group by either forcing behavior or by saying a certain behavior is not allowed. So rules and laws usually come from policies. Policies are like principles, values that are used to kind of make the individual rules. So when we talk about like foreign policy, that's how the United States is going to treat other countries around the world. And so ultimately, government, it's the institutions. So by institution, we mean kind of things set up like the police, the public library, the mayor's office, people and processes by which a group of people is ruled, and public policy, that is the rules and laws that we live under, are going to be created and, enforced. So we think about how laws are enforced. There's probably a lot of different ways that you can think of. One way is by force, right? The police arresting somebody, but most people very simply just choose to follow the laws that exist, either because of a consequence or because they realize that a lot of our laws exist for a pretty good reason. And so we call this idea the social contract, that people actually choose to follow an agreed upon set of rules and laws in order to benefit the society. One of my favorite examples is traffic. Rarely are people arrested for traffic violations, yet people stop at stop signs, stop lights, even if there are no police around. And so this way of self-enforcement, like standing in a line when you realize you can't just push your way to the front, that really holds society together. So in our government, when we say we the people, that's our social contract with our government. We agree to follow the rules, and the government agrees to protect our rights. And so let's talk about who gets to be a part of the society. So a citizen, this is very important, is a full member of a political society. You can be a legal resident and not be a citizen. But if you are a citizen, you have the full protection of rights, privileges, and responsibilities that come along with that. For instance, you may be called to serve on jury duty, or you are allowed to vote, or any number of things that you get. And so who gets to be a citizen and how citizenship is going to be applied to groups is going to be really important to understanding kind of how the government's going to treat both individuals and groups of people over time. So let's get this one out of the way real quick. America is not a pure democracy. We love to say, it's a free country, it's a democracy, but really we're a republic. A republic is different than a democracy in that it's a representative form of government. In theory, we could have a republic and not elect anyone. But in the United States, we decide that we are going to elect our representatives, and those representatives, not us, the individual citizens, participate in the day-to-day running of the government. And so we, the people, is a statement of republic that we are going to elect our representatives who will then rule in our place. And so the United States is a constitutional republic. It's a republic, representative based on the will of the people, but we also have a constitution. So other countries have constitutions, but every constitution is designed to limit or restrict the power of the government in some way. The Constitution is the highest law of the land. No law, whether it be a state law or a U.S. government law, can go against the Constitution. Various constitutions have existed without democracy. Great example was the Magna Carta, where the King of England actually had to give up a lot of power in order to get his nobles to help him fight a war. And so Constitution, the idea of it, you write down the laws, and that limits the power that the government might have. So in America, power is limited and defined by the Constitution. There's actually going to be a lot of fights about what the government is and is not allowed to do. And the electorate, voting citizens, they have a way to hold representatives accountable to this document. And so the United States is a constitutional republic in which we practice democracy in voting for our leaders, and in theory, we the people are very involved in this government, or at least the government is answerable to us. So the U.S. Constitution has a few things, and we can get into these later in the year, but there's kind of a couple big things I want to bring up. One, it's a limited government. There are things government is simply not allowed to do, and that's going to be big a little bit later in the story. We also have a Bill of Rights, secures your individual liberties. We're a country that has both states and a central government. We call that federalism, that there are state and city governments that actually share power with the government in Washington, D.C. A really great way to think about this is that there is a mayor for the city, a governor for the state, and a president for the country. 3 positions that all do essentially the same job, but for a different kind of group, either just the city or the state or indeed the country. And so that's going to be a big thing, fights between states and fights between states and federal government. I'm assuming at this point we're aware of our checks and balances like the presidential veto. I'm pretty sure that we're aware that we have elections in order to reflect the will of the people. So let's talk just for a minute about federalism, because this is the one you may not know the most about. The other ones I feel like you probably know something about, but federalism is the idea of power sharing between governments. And as illustrated by this lovely kind of little drawing here, the people on the ground represent the states pulling against the federal government in a tug of war of who gets to make what laws. So for example, here's some things that only states can do. Every state issues their own driver's license. So the requirements in Illinois are actually different than Indiana. Nevada, famous for Las Vegas, was actually the first state in the union to fully legalize gambling. It was the only state at that time that you could legally gamble in. And so that led to the explosion of Las Vegas. In Illinois, if you wish to purchase a firearm, you need a FOID card, an identification card that basically allows you to do so. Most states don't have that restriction. Also schools. Schools are run at the state level, as are various things. So as you can see, the idea of this is if you don't like one state, you can simply move to another that has different laws. But since we're all Americans, there is also federal laws that come down from Washington, D.C. that have a really crucial role in our government. The first is pretty obvious, but it's the United States Army. The federal government alone controls the Army, made up of soldiers from all the states. The FBI will investigate drug trafficking, other crimes that are going to be in more than one state. And so like the DEA and ATF, their whole idea is that whenever a crime crosses a state, they get involved. Immigration, passports, homeland security, kind of all of the things that involve our outside borders, as well as like trade and dealing with other countries. And then also kind of very crucial, the federal government enforces civil rights at the state level if necessary. When Ruby Bridges was denied access to school, the federal government sent U.S. Marshals, federal police, in order to enforce the laws there. And so a lot of this class is actually going to be disagreements between states and federal government over what they can and cannot do. And so our political conflicts in the United States are many. And as you can see today, they're still playing out in a lot of heated ways. But here are a couple of big questions we're going to ask. We're going to ask who gets to be an American citizen and why at any given point in our history. How should government power be used? And how have we fought over that in our past? Who should control what? States and federal governments. Should we be more inclined to have a free society? Or should we be more inclined to have a safe and orderly society? And how much should this government really get involved in our day-to-day lives, our jobs, our workplaces? And so in a lot of ways, what we're seeing play out today is a long-running tradition of Americans fighting over the meaning of the country and what it can and could be. And so a final reminder, check out your social sciences activity packet and please finish the political science section.